Today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet begins in 18th century Venice, in what is now Italy, and ends with a drawing to see how we can rise out of the ashes when things have gone very wrong in work and life. Intrigued? Well, then stick around for today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet. I'm John Paulus, at your service. Today's story begins with the noble society of palcatisti. What's a palcatisti, you ask? Well, it's a person who owns tickets for a palco, a palchetto, and the palco is a box in a theater. That's what we would call it in English. Palcatisti were box seat holders. And in fact, they were more than that. They were the association that owned the theater where a lot of theatrical productions were produced in Venice, or a theater, the Teatro San Benedetto. And San Benedetto burnt down. And they wanted to rebuild the theater, but there was a legal dispute. And the legal dispute involved a very, very, very influential Venetian family, the Venier family. And, well, our society of box seat ticket holders lost a court case. And so they were without a place to build a new theater. But unhindered, they found a spot in the neighborhood on the other side of one of Venice's many canals. The only reason I mentioned canals is canals are going to be important later on. So put that in your back pocket. So in honor of the grand event of being able to build their new theater, a better theater than they had ever had before, after their old theater had burnt down, and themselves as a group rising from the ashes of a devastating court loss to a very powerful Venetian family, our society of box seat ticket holders decided to rename their theater Teatro La Fenice, the Phoenix Theater. And La Fenice, as it's known, is now one of the world's most famous theaters for its production of first production of some of the most famous Italian operas. And La Fenice, like its mythological ancestor, the phoenix, which rises from its ashes and lives for ages and ages, still lives on. And it's burnt down a couple of other times and been rebuilt. So it's really the phoenix. So the word phoenix comes from ancient Greek. In fact, the oldest example we have of the word phoenix is in the Linear B script, a script used to write a Mycenaean Greek before the script that is currently used, which, fittingly for today's episode, was borrowed from the Phoenicians, whose name might have been what was written there in the Linear B script, because that's the phoenix, the phoenix is the Greek word for Phoenician too. And that's where a little bit of confusion enters in, because it's also the Greek word for a date palm, palm trees that have dates, that grow dates, the fruit. Well, I guess it's technically I think it's a droop. Well, that's for another episode. Anyway, early on, the word phoenix was used to describe this bird, a wondrous bird that is always associated with longevity and also light and the sun. And at some point, the phoenix became a symbol of rebirth, and the story of the phoenix combusting and then being reborn out of its own ashes. So that's where this idea of the phoenix and rebirth comes from. That idea of being reborn from the ashes. In the case of our famous theater, from the ashes of a court loss and the ashes of the old theater that was on the other side of that canal in Venice. And speaking of canals, there's another rebirth that was noticed thousands of miles away from Venice, where a group around the same time, actually earlier than the time when the canals in Venice were built, the Grand Canal that was built in the 12th century CE. And before that time, a group of people thousands of miles away were building irrigation canals in the Sonoran Desert. And we don't know their name or what they called themselves, but other groups referred to them as Hohokam. And this group of people built an extensive network of irrigation canals in the Sonoran Desert around the Gila and Salt rivers. And at some point in the 15th century, they abandoned those canals. About 380 years later, a shadowy figure named Darrell Dupas settled in the Sonoran Desert. Now, where Darrell Dupas was from, sometimes he said Marseille. Other people heard that he was from Paris. Others heard that he was an English nobleman who was an army officer, and after killing a fellow officer in a duel, was on the run and went to Australia and New Zealand and then California, and then finally settled in the Sonoran Desert, in the place where the Hohokam had built that extensive system of canals that was still visible to the eye all those centuries later. And story has it that Darrell Dupas was a great student of ancient Greek literature and Shakespeare, and when it came time to give a name to this settlement around these old canals, he thought the same thing that our noble society of box seat ticket holders thought in Venice, that this would be a city that was reborn from the ashes of an old great city that had been built there before on those canals, and that because of that, the city should be called Phoenix. And to this day, like La Fenice in Venice, the city of Phoenix, Arizona, still lives on as the fifth most populous city in the United States and the most populous state capital. And fittingly, half of its canal system that exists now has roots in the ancient canal system that the Hohokam built centuries and centuries before. Oh, and there are quite a few other phoenixes in the Sonoran Desert there. Phoenix dactylifera, the scientific name for date palms. So in honor of the phoenix, let's ask the cards how we can rise out of the ashes and flourish. So here we go. Yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles, cards, tell us some things. All right, here we go. It's card 13. Think of your work life as a pie. Think of each aspect of your life as a piece of pie of a different flavor. Your family work, your paid work, your hobbies, your volunteer work, your self-care work, etc., etc. What is the largest slice of your pie right now, and what do you want it to be in 6 months? So burn the old work-life pie to a crisp, and then start over and make a new one. And I'll see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet.